How a seizure Russian-flagged oil tanker, a single tanker, one nuclear submarine, and the risk of global war. This was the chessboard the United States stepped onto in early January 2026. On January 7, 2026, Washington executed one of the most carefully balanced maritime enforcement operations in modern history, seizing a Shadow Fleet oil tanker without firing a single torpedo at a Russian nuclear submarine. The target was a weather-beaten tanker sailing under a freshly painted Russian flag, carrying sanctioned Venezuelan crude through the North Atlantic. What followed was not brute force, but a demonstration of surveillance dominance, coalition air power, and precision coordination that redefined how blockades are enforced in the nuclear age. An operation now closely studied by analysts at Defense Strike Matrix. What looked like a routine interception quickly revealed itself as a geopolitical trap. The vessel at the center of the storm was originally known as Bella 1, a 15-year-old tanker flagged by U.S. intelligence as part of the global Shadow Fleet, a loose network of aging ships used by Russia, Iran, and Venezuela to move oil while bypassing sanctions. In December 2025, as the United States announced a full maritime blockade on Venezuelan crude exports, the tanker attempted to load oil and escape into international waters. When challenged by the U.S. Coast Guard near the Caribbean, the captain refused to comply, switched off the AIS transponder, and disappeared into the Atlantic, triggering a pursuit stretching more than 4,000 miles. The chase transformed from law enforcement into strategic deception. During its transatlantic escape, the crew executed a textbook Shadow Fleet maneuver. The hull was repainted at sea. The ship was renamed Marinara, and a Russian flag was raised. Within days, Moscow formally added the tanker to its maritime registry, declaring that interference with the vessel would constitute an attack on the Russian Federation itself. This bureaucratic maneuver was designed to exploit international law, placing the Coast Guard in a bind where a routine seizure could escalate into a superpower confrontation. Then Moscow raised the stakes beneath the waves. As the tanker moved toward the strategic gap between Iceland and the United Kingdom, U.S. intelligence confirmed that a Russian nuclear-powered attack submarine, likely a Yasin or a Kula class, had been dispatched to escort the ship. This was a deliberate anti-access strategy. A silent submarine lurking below the surface presented a lethal deterrent, one the lightly armed Coast Guard cutter could not challenge alone. Russian surface combatants were also reported in the wider area, forming a layered threat environment where a single miscalculation could spiral into open conflict. The decision to proceed required a different kind of firepower. Rather than matching steel with steel, U.S. planners chose to neutralize the threat through information and air dominance. The objective was not to destroy the submarine, but to make its presence irrelevant. American, British, and European commanders approved a coalition operation designed to expose, track, and contain the underwater escort while keeping escalation firmly under control. The sky became the decisive battlefield before the sea was ever touched. U.S. Navy P-8, a Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, surged into the North Atlantic, joined by British assets, saturating the area with sonobuoys. These small, expendable sensors formed a wide acoustic net, continuously feeding data on underwater movement. KC-135 tankers kept the aircraft on station around the clock, while British electronic intelligence platforms worked to strip the area of secure Russian communications. The message was unmistakable. The submarine was detected, tracked, and boxed in. With the underwater threat pinned, the surface operation could finally begin. Leading the final approach was the Monroe, a Legend-class cutter that had shadowed the tanker through weeks of brutal seas. The Atlantic swells made traditional boarding impossible, forcing planners to shift to a vertical assault. MH-60 Seahawk helicopters lifted off from supporting warships, hovering above the pitching deck as special operations teams fast-roped directly onto the tanker. The seizure itself was over in minutes, not hours. Operators secured the bridge, shut down the engines, and isolated the crew before resistance could form. The American flag was raised, signaling control of the vessel without a single shot fired. Throughout the operation, Coalition aircraft remained overhead, and the Russian submarine, now fully aware it was outmatched in the air, held its distance. The tanker was seized, the escort neutralized, and escalation avoided. This operation showcased how modern blockades are enforced far beyond cannons and hulls. Amphibious warships and destroyers acted as mobile command centers, launching helicopters and coordinating intelligence across vast distances. MH-60 Seahawk helicopters played a critical role, combining surface surveillance with anti-submarine warfare capabilities drones cannot replicate. Equipped with dipping sonar, torpedoes, radar, and electro-optical sensors, the Seahawk remains a decisive asset in contested maritime environments. Drones extended the battlefield far beyond the horizon. MQ-9 Reaper drones provided persistent, high-altitude surveillance, feeding real-time data to commanders for hours at a time. While drones lack true anti-submarine capability, their endurance and precision made them indispensable for tracking surface movements, monitoring choke points, and enforcing the broader Venezuelan oil and narcotics blockade that framed the entire operation. Together, these systems formed a seamless web of control. Ships, helicopters, and drones operated as a single organism, detecting, tracking, and dominating targets across sea and air without triggering open warfare. It was not just a seizure of a tanker. It was a demonstration of how modern military power applies pressure without crossing the nuclear threshold. The seizure of the Marinara sent a clear message across every ocean. Flags can be repainted, registries can be manipulated, and submarines can be dispatched, but none of it guarantees immunity. When faced with coalition surveillance and coordination, the Shadow Fleet's greatest weapon, ambiguity, was stripped away under relentless observation. This was not a battle won by missiles, but by mastery of escalation control. On January 7, 2026, the United States and its allies proved that even under the shadow of a nuclear submarine, enforcement can succeed without igniting a wider war. For analysts and viewers following global naval power shifts, this operation stands as a defining case study, one that Defense Strike Matrix will continue to dissect as maritime competition intensifies worldwide. If you want more deep dive breakdowns like this on modern warfare, naval power, and global military strategy, subscribe to Defense Strike Matrix now and stay ahead of the battles shaping tomorrow's world.